The man who betrayed people by dressing up as a clown, a creature who is supposed to put a smile on people's faces, was the reason why so many people cried. This man is John Wayne, who was a brutal sex offender and a murderer around 33 people, all of whom were either young boys or adult men. He was called the Killer Clown. He is known as one of the worst serial killers of all time, and if you don't think so, then watch this video till the end, and I'm sure that you will agree with me, because this man has undoubtedly committed some heinous acts. Let's start with John Wayne Gacy's early life, because, I don't know about you, but I'm always curious to know about the early life of a serial killer to see if such people show any dark, devilish signs in their youth, or are just like normal human beings. Let's get started. Gacy was born on March 17, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois. The son of Danish and Polish parents, Gacy and his siblings grew up with an alcoholic father who would beat the children with a razor strap if they were perceived to have misbehaved. His father physically assaulted Gacy's mother as well. Gacy's sister Karen would later say that the siblings learned to toughen up against the beatings and that Gacy would not cry. Gacy had a childhood full of mental and physical traumas, as he suffered further alienation at school and was unable to play with other children due to a congenital heart condition that was looked upon by his father as another failing. He later realized he was attracted to men and experienced great turmoil over his sexuality. Gacy's father was informed in 1949 that his son and another boy were caught sexually fondling a young girl. As punishment, his father whipped him with a razor strap. The same year, a family friend and contractor would molest Gacy in his truck on occasion. Gacy never told his father about it because he was afraid his mother would blame him. So, John Wayne Gacy did not have a normal early life overall. One of Gacy's high school friends recalled several occasions when his father ridiculed or beat his son without provocation. In 1957, he witnessed Gacy's father emerge drunk from the family basement and begin belittling, then hitting his son for no apparent reason. Gacy's mother attempted to intervene as her son simply put his hands up to defend himself, according to a friend. Gacy never hit his father back during these altercations. Looking at his family life, we can say that he had two chances to fix his life because he married twice but got divorced both times. He had two biological children and two stepdaughters. Gacy worked as a fast food chain manager during the 1960s and became a self-made building contractor and Democratic precinct captain in the Chicago suburbs in the 70s. Well-liked in his community, Gacy organized cultural gatherings and was active in political organizations and the JC's civic group. So the reason he was called a clown killer was because everyone knew him as a good, happy man who made people laugh, especially children. Gacy was a member of a Chicago area Jolly Joker clown club and frequently performed in clown attire and makeup at children's parties, charity fundraisers, and other events as his alter ego Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. The tactic that the killer clown used was to lure the victims by promising them that he would give them construction work or some other ruse, and then he would capture them and sexually assault them. He did not give up here. Later, he would torture the victims and then strangle them to death with his bare hands or with a rope. Years later, during a conversation with detectives while he was under surveillance, Gacy discussed his work as a clown, remarking, "Clowns can get away with murder." So in total, he raped and killed around 33 victims. Let's see what the pattern was, or what the common traits were that he was looking for in his victims. They included people he knew, often employees, along with random victims lured off the streets with promises of jobs, drink, or money for sex. Once inside, the victims were usually plied with alcohol or drugs before Gacy would offer to perform a trick with the pair of handcuffs. Gacy would cuff his hands behind his own back, subtly freeing himself with the key hidden between his fingers, before offering to show his victims how to perform the trick themselves. Only 28 of Gacy's 33 victims have been conclusively identified. Attempts to identify the remaining 5 bodies using DNA are ongoing. Let's see the names of these victims, their age, and the places where their dead bodies were found. Looking back, we can see that the first sexual victim of John Gacy was Donald Voorhees. In August 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees Jr., the son of Donald E. Voorhees, a local politician and a fellow JC. Gacy lured Voorhees to a house with the promise of showing him a heterosexual stag film regularly played at JC events. Gacy plied Voorhees with alcohol, allowing him to watch a stag movie, then persuaded him to engage in mutual oral sex, adding, "You have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with women." Over the following months, Gacy similarly abused other several youths, including one whom he encouraged to have sex with his own wife, before blackmailing him into performing oral sex on him. Gacy tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct homosexual experiments in the interest of scientific research and paid them up $50 each. Voorhees informed his father in March 1968 that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Voorhees Sr. immediately called the cops, who arrested Gacy and charged him with oral sodomy on Voorhees and attempted assault on 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Gacy vehemently denied the charges and demanded a polygraph examination. The findings revealed that Gacy was nervous when denying any wrongdoing in relation to both young men. Gacy publicly denied any wrongdoing and insisted the charges against him were politically motivated. Voorhees Sr. had opposed Gacy's nomination for appointment as president of the Iowa JCs. Several fellow JCs found Gacy's story credible and rallied to his support. Gacy persuaded one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, to physically assault Voorhees on August 30, 1968, in an attempt to discourage the boy from testifying against him in court. Schroeder was promised $300 by Gacy. Schroeder agreed and lured Voorhees to an isolated country park in early September, sprayed mace in his eyes, and then beat him. Voorhees, however, escaped and reported the assault to police, identifying Schroeder as his attacker. They arrested him the following day. While initially denying the involvement, Schroeder soon confessed to assaulting Voorhees, indicating he had done so at Gacy's request. Police arrested Gacy and laid an additional charge of hiring Schroeder to assault and intimidate Voorhees against him. Gacy was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at the University of Iowa Psychiatric Hospital on September 12. 2 doctors examined him for 17 days before concluding that he had an antisocial personality disorder, the clinical term for sociopathy and/or psychopathy, and would not benefit from therapy or medical treatment, and that his behavior pattern would likely bring him to repeated conflict with society. Doctors determined that he was mentally competent to stand trial. The psychiatric test of Gacy was conducted in 1968, and a section of the report said, "The most striking aspect of the test results is the patient's total denial of the responsibility for everything that has happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He portrays himself as victim of circumstances and blames others who are out to get him. The patient attempts to elicit sympathy by portraying himself as a victim of a hostile environment." This was the first time Gacy was charged with the crime, but later he was able to clear himself and was not locked up for jail. On January 3, 1972, Gacy committed his first known murder. Following a family party on the evening of January 2nd, Gacy decided to drive to the Civic Center in the Loop to view an ice sculpture display in the early hours of the following morning, according to his later account. He then enticed Timothy Jack McCoy, 16, from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal into his car. McCoy was returning to Omaha, Nebraska from a Christmas vacation in Michigan. Gacy took McCoy on a sightseeing tour of Chicago and then drove him to his home with the promise that he could spend the night and be driven back to the station in time to catch the bus. Prior to McCoy's identification, he was known simply as the Greyhound bus. Gacy claimed he woke early the following morning to find McCoy standing in his bedroom doorway with a kitchen knife in his hand. He then jumped up from his bed, and McCoy raised both arms in a gesture of surrender. Tilting the knife upwards and accidentally cutting Gacy's forearm, Gacy twisted the knife from McCoy's wrist, banged his head against the bedroom wall, kicked him against his wardrobe, and walked towards him. McCoy then kicked Gacy in the stomach, doubling him over. Gacy then grabbed McCoy, shouting, "Mother effer, I'll kill you!" He then rustled McCoy to the floor and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest as he straddled him. As McCoy lay dying, Gacy claimed he washed the knife in the bathroom, then went to his kitchen and saw an opened carton of eggs and a slab of unsliced bacon on his kitchen table. McCoy had also set the table for two. He had walked into Gacy's room to wake him while absent-mindedly carrying the kitchen knife in his hand. Gacy buried McCoy in his crawlspace and later covered his grave with a layer of concrete. In an interview several years later after his arrest, Gacy said that immediately after killing McCoy, he felt totally, yet noted that as he stabbed McCoy and listened to the gurgulations and gasping for air, he had experienced a mind-numbing orgasm, he added. That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill. This was the whole scene of the first murder, and maybe the point where he got addicted to killing people. As we do not have enough time to look into the details of all the murders, we will just now tell you the name, age, and date of the murder and the area where the dead bodies of the other 27 victims were found. The names of the 28 identified victims are: John Butkovich, 18, was found murdered in the garage on July 31, 1975. Daryl Julius Sampson, 18, murdered under the dining room table on April 6, 1976. Randall Wayne Reffitt, 15, murdered on May 14, 1976, in the crawlspace. Samuel G. Dodd Stapleton, 14, murdered on May 14, 1976, in the crawlspace. Michael Lawrence Bonin, 17, murdered on June 3, 1976, in the crawlspace. William Huey Carroll Jr., 16, was found in the crawlspace on June 13, 1976. James Byron Hackinson, 16, murdered on August 5, 1976, in the crawlspace. Rick Lewis Johnston, 17, murdered on August 6, 1976, in the crawlspace. Kenneth Ray Parker, 16, murdered on August 24, 1976, in the crawlspace. Michael M. Marino, 14, discovered in the crawlspace on October 24, 1976. William George Bundy, 19, murdered on October 26, 1976, in the crawlspace. Francis Wayne Alexander, 21, murdered on December 1, 1976, in the crawlspace. Gregory John Godzik, 17, murdered on December 12, 1976, in the crawlspace. John Allen Cizik, 19, murdered on January 20, 1977, found in the crawlspace. John Stephen Prestige, 20, murdered on March 15, 1977, found in the crawlspace. Matthew Walter Bauman, 19, murdered on July 5, 1977, in the crawlspace. Robert Edward Gilroy Jr., 18, murdered on September 15, 1977, in the crawlspace. John Anthony Mowry, 19, was murdered on September 25, 1977, and his body was found in the crawlspace. Russell Lloyd Nelson, 21, was murdered on October 17, 1977, found in the crawlspace. Robert David Winch, 16, murdered on November 10, 1977, found in the crawlspace. Tommy Joe Bowling, 20, murdered on November 18, 1877, found in the crawlspace. David Paul Talsma, 19, murdered on December 9, 1977, found in the crawlspace. William Wayne Kindred, 19, murdered on February 16, 1978, was found in the crawlspace. Timothy David O'Rourke, 20, was discovered in the Des Plaines River on June 16 to 23, 1978. Frank William Landingen, 19, was murdered on November 4, 1978, and his body was discovered in the Des Plaines River. James Mazara, 20, was murdered on November 24, 1978, and he was discovered in the Des Plaines River. Robert Jerome Peist, 15, was murdered on December 11, 1978, and his body was found in the Des Plaines River. The trial of John Wayne Gacy began on February 6, 1980. After Gacy confessed to the crimes, the debate centered on whether he should be declared insane and thus committed to the state mental facility. Gacy told police that the murders were carried out by a different personality, and mental health professionals testified on both sides about Gacy's mental state. After a brief jury deliberation, Gacy was found guilty of 33 murders and became known as one of the most ruthless serial killers in American history. He received 12 death sentences and 21 natural life sentences. Gacy was imprisoned at the Menard Correctional Center in Illinois for almost a decade and a half, appealing the sentence and offering contradictory statements on the murders in interviews. Though he had confessed, Gacy later denied being guilty of the charges and had a 900 telephone number set up with a 12-minute recorded statement declaring his innocence. As both anti-death penalty forces and those in favor of the execution made their opinions known, Gacy died by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois. Ending this video with a personal thought. I wonder if the death of serial killer John Wayne Gacy will be enough to calm the sore hearts of the families of his victims. May we all be protected from such animals living in the society.